The distress beacon had been screaming into the void for 3 cycles when the Galactic Council finally acknowledged it. I should know. I was monitoring Station 47 Beta when that pathetic little signal came limping through subspace like a wounded calyx cub crying for its mother. The Yalthine colony on Praxis 4 was under siege, and honestly, nobody really cared that much. The Yalthine weren't particularly important in the grand scheme of things. They were farmers, artisans, decent enough folk who kept to themselves and made excellent fermented grain beverages that could knock a Vraxian on their posterior sensory cluster after 2 sips. But protocol is protocol, and the Council, in their infinite bureaucratic wisdom, decided someone had to at least pretend to care. So they put out a call for assistance, expecting maybe a peacekeeping frigate from the Andromedian Confederacy, or perhaps a few mercenary vessels from the Outer Rim cartels who'd show up, fire a few warning shots, collect their payment, and leave. Standard stuff, really. Nothing to write home about. What they got instead. Well, let me just say that when I saw what dropped out of hyperspace above Praxis 4, I nearly choked on my morning nutrition paste. 12 vessels. 12 massive, brutish, absolutely terrifying vessels that looked like someone had taken the concept of warship and decided to multiply it by your worst nightmare, and then add a few layers of aggressive industrial revolution, just for flavor. They weren't sleek like Andromedian cruisers, weren't elegant like Solarian explorers, and they certainly weren't the delicate crystalline, no, wait, I can't use that word. They weren't the delicate, transparent constructs the Luminari flew around in. These were human ships. Oh, you've heard of humans, right? The Deathworlders. The ones who come from that insane planet where everything is trying to kill them all the time, where the gravity is so intense that their bones are basically reinforced durasteel, where their atmosphere is so oxygen-rich it's practically corrosive to most species, where their weather systems are so violent they have categories for their hurricanes like they're collecting them. Those humans. The Yalthine had asked for help. What they got was Earth's Third Expeditionary Fleet, and let me tell you, the Crithian raiders who'd been terrorizing Praxis 4 took one look at those vessels and probably needed to change whatever equivalent of undergarments their species wore. I pulled up the tactical display, my 4 manipulator appendages trembling slightly as I zoomed in on the lead vessel. The designation came through our translation matrix, UES Indomitable. Because of course they'd name their ships things like that. Not Peaceful Flower or Harmonious Negotiator or Please Don't Shoot Us We Come in Peace. No, these humans went straight for Indomitable, which roughly translated to You Cannot Break This Thing. No matter how hard you try, so don't even bother. The ship was, how do I even describe it? Imagine taking a city block, covering it in armor plating thick enough to stop a plasma cannon, adding enough weapons to level a small moon, slapping some engines on it that could probably accelerate it to speeds that would make a physics professor weep, and then painting it gunmetal gray because apparently humans think that's intimidating. Spoiler alert, it absolutely is. Commander Vexthor, my immediate superior, a Thraxian with more bureaucratic experience than combat sense, waddled over to my station, his optical sensors widening as he saw the display. Those are human vessels, he said, stating the obvious in that special way only career administrators can manage. Yes, Commander, I replied, trying to keep the sarcasm out of my voice and failing miserably. 12 of them, to be precise. With enough firepower to atomize this entire sector if they felt like having a particularly aggressive afternoon. But we only asked for peacekeeping support, Vexthor sputtered, his throat sac inflating with anxiety. A few ships to discourage the raiders, not an entire battle fleet. I pulled up the communication logs, scanning through the bureaucratic nightmare that was Galactic Council Standard Request Form 7-743. Here's the problem, Commander. See this section here, where it asks for appropriate military response to neutralize hostile threats. Someone, and I'm not naming names, but their identification code definitely isn't yours, checked the box for maximum necessary force. Vexthor's skin tone shifted to a pale chartreuse, which in Thraxian body language roughly translates to, "Oh no, I've made a terrible mistake, and now we're all going to die." Which, to be fair, was a reasonable reaction when you've accidentally summoned a human Deathworld fleet to handle what was essentially a piracy problem. The Crithian raiders, bless their simple little hearts, apparently didn't get the memo that discretion is the better part of valor. They were still orbiting Praxis 4, their ramshackle collection of 20-ish vessels, cobbled together from salvage, held together with prayer and stolen parts, actually opening fire on the human fleet. I watched in something between horror and morbid fascination as their plasma bolts streaked across the void toward the Indomitable. The bolts hit the human ship's shields and, well, dissipated harmlessly would be the technical term. Bounced off like raindrops hitting a planetary defense grid would be more accurate. The human fleet didn't even bother returning fire immediately. They just sat there, taking the hits, probably laughing inside their pressurized death boxes, while they calculated the most efficient way to end this embarrassing display. Then, the humans opened a communication channel. The voice that came through, deep, confident, with that particular edge of someone who knows they're holding all the cards and is generous enough to give you one chance to fold, belonged to Admiral Kaito Reeves. Yes, I know. The name sounds like it came from at least 2 different cultural backgrounds. That's humans for you. They've been mixing their gene pools for so long that half of them have names that sound like they were generated by throwing darts at a linguistic map. Crithian vessels, Admiral Reeves said, and even through the translation matrix, you could hear the dangerous calm in his voice. This is Admiral Reeves of the United Earth ship Indomitable, Third Expeditionary Fleet. You are in violation of Galactic Council Statute 773. Subsection 12. Regarding armed aggression against civilian populations. You have 30 seconds to power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Bird processing. This is your only warning. 30 seconds. He gave them 30 seconds. I've seen Galactic Council peacekeeping forces spend 3 cycles negotiating with pirates, offering them amnesty deals and rehabilitation programs and therapy sessions to help them work through their aggressive tendencies. This human just rolled up with enough firepower to crack a planet and gave them half a minute to surrender. The Crithian commander, a particularly dense specimen named Gorvax the Reaver, because apparently evil raiders have to have ridiculous names too, responded by firing every weapon his fleet had directly at the human ships, which, in retrospect, was probably the worst tactical decision anyone had made since the Vraxians tried to invade a Terran colony and learned that humans consider wounded to be a motivational state, rather than a reason to retreat. Admiral Reeves sighed. I actually heard him sigh over the comm channel, like a parent whose patience has finally run out with a particularly bratty child. All ships, he said, his voice hardening, weapons free. Disable but do not destroy. Council wants these idiots alive for trial. Try not to make too much of a mess. And then, my friends, then I witnessed what humans call combined arms warfare, which is apparently their quaint term for organized apocalypse. The human fleet moved like a single organism, each ship sliding into position with precision that would make a synchronized swimming team jealous. Not that I've seen human synchronized swimming, but I've heard stories, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they somehow weaponized that too. Railguns opened up first. Massive projectiles accelerated to a fraction of light speed, not aimed to kill but to cripple. I watched as magnetic slugs punched through Crithian engine blocks like they were made of tissue paper, sending 3 of their ships spinning helplessly through space. Then came the missiles, and oh, what missiles. They weren't the standard antimatter warheads most civilizations use. No, humans apparently decided that was too simple. These were precision-guided, AI-assisted, multi-stage munitions that could probably do your taxes, while simultaneously turning your ship into an expensive piece of modern art. They streaked across the void in impossibly complex patterns, weaving through return fire like dancers at some cosmic ballet, before slamming into weapon systems, communication arrays, and navigational computers with surgical accuracy. Within 90 seconds, half the Crithian fleet was disabled, drifting, defenseless. The other half was trying desperately to run, their faster ships burning their engines to maximum, trying to reach hyperspace jump coordinates. Poor bastards probably thought they had a chance. The Indomitable lit up its main gun. I'd seen the specifications in the database, but seeing it in action was something else entirely. A lance of coherent energy, bright enough to make me close 3 of my 4 eyes, reached out across thousands of kilometers and gently tapped the fleeing ship's hyperspace drives, overloading them just enough to force emergency shutdowns without causing catastrophic explosions. Because apparently humans can modulate their world-ending weapons to deliver precise, non-lethal strikes. Just in case you weren't already terrified enough. The battle, if you could even call it that, was over in less than 4 minutes. 4 minutes. 20 Crithian raider vessels, disabled or captured, their crews sitting in their ships wondering what in the 17 hells had just happened to them. The humans hadn't even deployed fighters yet. The sleek little death machines I could see sitting in their carrier bays, probably disappointed they didn't get to play. Praxis 4 Control, Admiral Reeves' voice came through again, now directed at the Yalthine colony below. This is the Indomitable. The hostile fleet has been neutralized. We're deploying marine contingents to secure the raider vessels and rendering assistance to any colonists who need it. Also, we brought medical supplies, construction equipment, and about 7,000 tons of food stores, because our intelligence suggested you folks might be running low after 3 months of siege. Hope you like rice. We brought a lot of rice. Commander Vexthor turned to look at me, his expression somewhere between awe and existential terror. They brought food, he squeaked. They came prepared for battle and humanitarian relief. Deathworlders, Commander, I said, leaning back in my chair and trying to process what I'd just witnessed. They're always prepared for everything. Probably because on their planet, if you're not prepared for everything, everything tries to eat you. But here's the thing that really got me. The detail that made my cognitive organs do a little flip. The human fleet wasn't done. Oh no, while their marine contingents were efficiently rounding up Crithian raiders and providing medical attention to the ones who'd been injured in the brief exchange, other human ships were deploying to the colony surface. Not weapons platforms, not occupation forces, construction crews, engineers, doctors, agriculturalists. Within 3 hours, humans had set up a field hospital that was treating Yalthine colonists who'd been injured during the siege, repaired the colony's primary power generator that the Crithians had damaged, and started distributing supplies. I watched through orbital surveillance as human soldiers, these towering figures in powered armor that made them look even more imposing than they already were, helped Yalthine farmers repair irrigation systems and rebuild damaged habitats. One of the human marines, a woman with skin darker than a Vraxian night, and a smile that could probably negotiate peace treaties on its own, was caught on camera teaching a group of young Yalthine how to play something called soccer with an improvised ball made from spare equipment. The children, who'd been living in fear for months, were laughing, actually laughing, as this armored warrior showed them how to kick the ball between makeshift goals. This doesn't make sense, Vexthor muttered, watching the same feeds I was. They're warriors. Killers. We've seen the reports from their conflicts. Humans are terrifyingly efficient at warfare. Why are they helping? Why do they care? I pulled up humanity's first contact files, the psychological profiles the Council had compiled over the decades since Earth had joined the galactic community. Because, Commander, humans aren't just deathworlders. They're pack-bonding deathworlders. On their planet, they evolved as tribal creatures who survived by working together, by protecting their groups, by caring for their injured and weak. They imprint on things, form attachments. Give a human a cause to protect, and they'll move obliterate raider fleets, and then rebuild colonies in their spare time. A transmission came through from the surface, this one from Matriarch Yaline, the colony's leader. Her voice was thick with emotion, her gratitude almost painful to hear. Admiral Reeves, we don't know how to thank you. We called for help, expected perhaps a ship or two, and you brought all of this. Why? Admiral Reeves' response was simple, straightforward, delivered in that matter-of-fact way humans have when they're doing something they consider completely normal. Because you needed it, ma'am, and because that's what allies do. they show up. Besides, the Third Fleet was in the sector anyway, and we weren't doing anything particularly interesting. Figured we'd make ourselves useful. My crew's going to stick around for a few weeks if that's all right. Help you folks get back on your feet properly. We've got some excellent engineers who love a good rebuilding project. I'm going to be honest with you. I've been monitoring Galactic Council activities for 16 cycles, and I thought I'd seen everything. Diplomatic incidents, trade disputes, the occasional skirmish over mining rights in contested nebulae. But watching humans do their thing, that was something entirely new. Something that made me question every assumption I'd had about how species interact with each other in this vast, uncaring universe. The Third Fleet stayed at Praxis 4 for exactly 19 days. 19 days during which they completely transformed the colony from a besieged, frightened settlement into something that looked more prosperous than it had been before the Crithian raiders even showed up. And I know that for a fact because I cross-referenced the colony's production reports from 6 months prior. The humans didn't just rebuild what was broken, they improved it. Admiral Reeves had his chief engineer, a man named Dimitri Okonkwo, who somehow managed to be both the gentlest person you'd ever meet and also someone who could probably disassemble a fusion reactor with his bare hands and a positive attitude, work with the Yalthine to upgrade their energy infrastructure. They installed backup generators, redundant systems, even a defensive grid that could, if necessary, repel another raider attack without outside assistance. Because apparently humans think ahead, prepare for worst-case scenarios, and then prepare for the worst-case scenario's evil twin just to be safe. The medical team, led by Dr. Sophia Tran, a woman so brilliant that she'd published 17 papers on xenobiology, and somehow found time to also become an expert in trauma counseling, didn't just treat injuries. She trained Yalthine medics in advanced techniques, left behind supplies that would last them years, and set up a telemedicine link so they could consult with Earth medical facilities if they encountered something beyond their expertise. I watched her spend 4 hours one evening sitting with a Yalthine child who'd witnessed her family habitat getting destroyed by raiders, just talking. Being present, showing that someone cared. But here's what really got me. What made my respiratory spiracles do that weird flutter thing they do when I'm emotionally compromised. The humans made friends. Real, genuine friendships. I monitored their communications, saw human Marines exchanging contact information with Yalthine farmers, promising to stay in touch, to send messages, to visit again if they were ever in the sector. One of the fighter pilots, a young guy named Hassan Kamathi, with reflexes that would make a Salarian jealous, actually proposed to his longtime boyfriend via subspace communication from the colony's surface, surrounded by cheering Yalthine who'd adopted him as some kind of honorary family member over the course of 2 weeks. The Crithian raiders, meanwhile, were having a very different experience. The humans had secured them in specially configured holding cells aboard the Indomitable. And contrary to what you might expect from a species that can wage warfare with such brutal efficiency, they were treating their prisoners, well, humanely. I know, the irony of that word isn't lost on me. I accessed the security feeds from the detention area, purely for intelligence gathering purposes. You understand? Definitely not because I was morbidly fascinated by everything these deathworlders. The Crithian prisoners were receiving medical care, 3 meals a day that actually met their nutritional requirements, even access to recreational activities. One of the human guards, a massive woman named Lieutenant Keahi Ramirez, who looked like she could bench press a small shuttle, was caught on camera teaching a group of younger Crithian raiders how to play chess, patiently explaining strategies, while simultaneously making it clear that any attempt at escape would result in her personally demonstrating why humans evolved as pursuit predators. They're fattening us up before they eat us. I heard one Crithian prisoner mutter to another, his voice picked up by the cell's audio monitors. I've heard stories about deathworlders. They're savage, brutal. This kindness is just psychological warfare. Lieutenant Ramirez, who'd apparently heard the comment, laughed. This deep, genuine sound that somehow managed to be both warm and slightly terrifying. Buddy, she said, moving her rook to put the Crithian's king in check, if we wanted to eat you, we wouldn't bother with the chess lessons. We'd just, eat you. But good news, Humans stopped being cannibals a few thousand years ago. Well, mostly. There was that one incident on Mars Colony 7, but we don't talk about that. Checkmate, by the way. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session to discuss the human intervention incident, as they were officially calling it, because apparently successfully resolving a crisis situation is considered an incident when humans are involved. I tuned into the proceedings, watching as representatives from 47 different species argued about what to do with the Third Fleet, whether their response had been proportional, and whether humans should be reprimanded for bringing overwhelming force to handle a raider problem. The Yalthine representative, Matriarch Yaleen herself, who'd made the trip to Council Hukugors specifically for this session, stood up during the proceedings and delivered what I can only describe as the most eloquent defense of human intervention I've ever heard. Her voice carried through the council chambers, cutting through the bureaucratic noise like a plasma torch through hull plating. With respect to this esteemed body, she said, and oh, you could hear the sarcasm dripping from that phrase, you asked for my opinion on whether the human response was appropriate. So let me tell you what I think. For 3 months, my people sent distress signals. We followed every protocol, filed every form, waited patiently for the Galactic Council to acknowledge that we were dying. And what did we get? Sympathetic statements. Promises that someone would look into it. Assurances that a peacekeeping mission would be organized just as soon as all the proper committees had been consulted and all the correct permissions had been obtained. She paused, letting that sink in, and I could see several council members shifting uncomfortably in their seats, which is quite a feat considering how many different body configurations were present. And then the humans arrived, Matriarch Yaleen continued, her voice rising with emotion. Within 4 minutes of entering the system, they'd neutralized every threat. Within 3 hours, they were providing medical care and disaster relief. Within 19 days, they'd not only repaired everything the raiders had destroyed, but made our colony stronger, safer, more self-sufficient than we'd ever been. So you ask me if their response was proportional. I say it was perfect. I say it was exactly what we needed. And I say that if this is what happens when you accidentally check the wrong box on a bureaucratic form, then maybe, just maybe, we should be checking that box more often. The chamber erupted into chaos, which is saying something because most species represented there consider chaos to be the absence of proper filing systems. But the human, Admiral Reeves, who'd been called to testify via hololink from the Indomitable, just smiled. This small, knowing expression that suggested he'd expected exactly this reaction. Members of the council, he said, his voice calm and measured, cutting through the noise. Humanity didn't join the galactic community to cause problems. We joined because we believe in cooperation, in mutual defense, in helping our neighbors. When we received the call that Praxis 4 needed assistance, we responded with the resources we had available. Yes, the Third Fleet is a military force. Yes, we're capable of considerable violence when necessary, but we're also capable of considerable compassion, considerable generosity, and considerable patience. We're whatever the situation requires us to be. He leaned forward slightly, his image flickering in the holographic projection, and his expression shifted to something more serious. But I want to be absolutely clear about something. If you call for Earth's help, we're going to show up with everything we have. We don't do half measures. We don't send a token force to wave a flag and file a report. When humans commit to something, we commit completely. If that's a problem for the Council, then perhaps you should think carefully about whether you want us responding to distress calls in the future. The threat, because, let's be honest, that's what it was, delivered politely, but unmistakably, hung in the chamber like a supernova about to go critical. Several council members looked like they wanted to object, to assert the council's authority, to remind this human that he was speaking to representatives of civilizations that had been navigating the stars when Earth was still figuring out basic agriculture. But then someone pulled up the tactical recordings from Praxis 4, showed the 4-minute battle, showed the 19 days of reconstruction, showed the grateful faces of Yalthine colonists, showed the Crithian prisoners receiving better care than they probably deserved, and suddenly the objections seemed to die in their throats. Because here's the thing about humans that I think most of the galaxy is still struggling to understand: their contradictions wrapped in paradoxes, tied together with determination and an absolutely terrifying amount of stubbornness. They're warriors who bring rice to feed refugees. They're killers who teach traumatized children how to play games. They're capable of obliterating entire fleets and then spending weeks rebuilding the infrastructure their enemies destroy. They pack bond with anything that holds still long enough, adopt entire colonies as surrogate family members, and will absolutely burn down the universe to protect those they've decided to care about. The Council eventually passed a resolution after 6 hours of debate that I'm convinced took years off my projected lifespan, officially commending the Third Fleet for their exemplary service and proportional response to the Praxis 4 situation, which in Galactic Council speak roughly translates to, "We're terrified of you but also incredibly grateful. Please keep doing what you're doing, but maybe warn us first so we don't have collective heart attacks." Admiral Reeves accepted the commendation with grace, promised to file more detailed reports in the future, and then, because humans apparently have a flair for dramatic timing, announced that the Third Fleet would be establishing a permanent patrol route through the sector, just to make sure no other colonies experienced what Praxis 4 had gone through, free of charge. No strings attached, just neighborly protection. I watched the Council representatives process this information, saw the calculations happening behind multiple types of eyes as they tried to figure out if this was a power play, a genuine offer of assistance, or something else entirely. The humans, meanwhile, were already leaving the Council chambers, their business concluded, probably planning their next patrol route and wondering if they'd packed enough rice. 3 cycles later, I received an encrypted message from an old intelligence contact in the Outer Rim. The Crithian Raider Confederation, the larger organization that Gorvax the Reaver had belonged to, had held an internal meeting to discuss the Praxis 4 incident. According to my contact's information, the meeting lasted approximately 7 minutes before the Confederation unanimously voted to add all human-protected colonies to their Do Not Raid Under Any Circumstances list, right between Raxian military installations and active supernovas. Apparently, after the surviving Crithian raiders from Praxis 4 had been released from human custody. Yes, released, after serving minimal sentences and receiving vocational training, because humans apparently believe in rehabilitation. They'd spread the word about what happens when you mess with people the humans have decided to care about. The stories had grown in the telling, as stories do, until Admiral Reeves had become this mythical figure who could disassemble a ship with a stern look, and Lieutenant Ramirez could supposedly arm wrestle a black hole into submission. Were the stories accurate? Not really. Were they effective? Absolutely. Piracy in human-patrolled sectors dropped by 73% within a month, and several raider groups actually reached out to human authorities asking if there might be alternative employment opportunities available, because apparently, even pirates can recognize when they're outclassed and should probably consider a career change. I sent a report to Commander Vexthor summarizing all of this, including the long-term effects of the human intervention, the changes in regional security dynamics, and the unexpected diplomatic ramifications of having a species that solves problems by applying overwhelming force, followed by overwhelming kindness. His response was a single line: "This is the most terrifying thing I've ever read, and also somehow the most hopeful. What in the 17 hells are we going to do about the humans?" Honestly, I don't think we need to do anything about the humans. They're doing just fine on their own, wandering around the galaxy, making friends, obliterating threats, rebuilding colonies, and generally being the most chaotically benevolent force the universe has ever encountered. They asked for help. The Council sent the form with the wrong box checked, and what arrived was a Deathworlder fleet that turned out to be exactly what everyone needed. The Yaltheen certainly aren't complaining. Last I heard, they're holding an annual festival called The Day the Stars Sent Friends, celebrating the arrival of the Third Fleet. They've erected a monument in their central plaza, a statue depicting Admiral Reeves standing with Matriarch Yaltheen, surrounded by representations of human marines helping Yaltheen colonists. It's become something of a pilgrimage site for other colonies who've received human assistance. A reminder that sometimes help arrives in unexpected forms, wearing powered armor and carrying enough firepower to level mountains, but also bringing medical supplies, construction equipment, and apparently way too much rice. As for me, I've been reassigned to human fleet liaison duties, which basically means I spend my days trying to predict what the humans are gonna do next and failing spectacularly at it. Because Deathworlders are unpredictable, compassionate, violent, gentle, terrifying, inspiring contradictions who've somehow convinced themselves that protecting the entire galaxy is just something neighbors do for each other. And you know what? After watching them in action, after seeing what they're capable of when someone asks for help, I'm starting to think they might actually pull it off. They might actually manage to make this chaotic, dangerous, beautiful universe a little bit safer, one disabled raider fleet and rebuilt colony at a time. So the next time you see a human warship dropping out of hyperspace above your position, don't panic. Don't assume the worst. Just accept that you're about to receive more help than you asked for, delivered with more efficiency than you thought possible, followed by an offer of friendship that you'll somehow find impossible to refuse. Because that's what humans do. They show up, they solve problems, they make friends, and they leave things better than they found them, whether you're ready for it or not. And honestly, the galaxy could use more of that. Even if it does come in the form of 12 massive warships, an admiral named Reeves, and enough rice to feed a small planetary system. Welcome to the era of human intervention, where the most terrifying thing about Deathworlders turns out to be not their capacity for violence, but their absolute refusal to let their friends face danger alone.